Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event of Israel Bonds featuring our Consul General in New York, Dani Dayan. I want first to start by saying thank you all for joining today's event. Thank you all for being active with Israel Bonds. The mere fact that you're on this call means that you support Israel Bonds, you support the State of Israel, and I want to thank you for that, especially in this time. I didn't say, by the way, my name is Israel Maimon, and I'm the CEO of Israel Bonds. Dani, thank you very much. Dani Dayan, our Consul General of Israel in New York. I want to thank you for your contribution to the State of Israel, all throughout your life, I would say, and for the Jewish people. I want to thank you for your friendship with Israel Bonds, your continued support of Israel Bonds, and our personal friendship. We in Israel Bonds are working full scale with full energy from first thing in the morning to late night to secure the capital that the State of Israel needs in this time. And I have to say, I'm very proud with what we're doing, our staff members and our lay leadership. For the introduction of Dani, I want to call upon Dr. Richard Agrin. Richard has been for many years, has been the Israel Bonds co-chair of 3 New Jersey counties, Somerset, Hunterdon, and Warren. Richard, thank you and your family for your longtime support of Israel Bonds, the Jewish people, and the State of Israel. Richard.
Hello, and welcome to the latest in the Israel Bonds series of global events. Today, Zev Rubinstein, Vice President for Business Development for Israel Bonds, and his team are proud to present Ambassador Dani Dayan. Before beginning our program, I want to let you know Ambassador Dayan will be taking questions following his remarks. Many of you likely already have questions in mind. So in order for the question and answer session to go efficiently, please email your questions to james.galfund@israelbonds.com. That's james.galfund@israelbonds.com. Don't forget the dot between James and Galfund. Please put your full name and your location in the email. Let's begin. Ambassador Dani Dayan was appointed to his diplomatic post in March of 2016. Over the ensuing 4 years, he has represented the State of Israel with pride and distinction to communities throughout New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Delaware. Born in Buenos Aires, Ambassador Dayan is renowned not only as an esteemed diplomat, but also as a highly regarded Israeli public figure, lecturer, entrepreneur. He has served as chairman of the Council of Jewish Communities in Judea and Samaria, and was the Council's chief foreign envoy. Ambassador Dayan is a frequent guest on major news outlets, including CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. He has also contributed opinion pieces to the New York Times, Boston Globe, The Guardian, among other international publications. Ambassador Dayan will soon return to Israel, so this is a welcome opportunity to thank him for the many ways in which he has strengthened the bonds of friendship between U.S. and Israel. Let's welcome one of Israel's foremost emissaries and a great friend of the American Jewish community, Ambassador Dani Dayan.
Thank you so much to both of you. I think that my first public appearance as Consul General-elect to New York in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in the Hilton Hotel in Tel Aviv, was with an Israel Bonds delegation that visited the country. So we are closing a circuit. In the midst, we did really a lot of joint ventures, and I'm always happy to assist Israel Bonds, which is one of the most important arms to develop Israeli economy. As you said, I will return soon to Israel in August 1st, Motzai Shabbat. I will take a flight, the definitive flight home back to Israel. And I return to Israel optimistic. I return to Israel optimistic about Israel, about the other areas of the world we will talk about probably in a different occasion. I see the future of Israel in bright colors, and I would like to explain what it is. What I am saying now is not just a pitch in order to sell bonds, but a reality. First of all, Israel is today stronger than ever. Now, the strength of Israel, I never attributed to the fact that we are strong any, an intrinsic value. Strength is a necessity. I believe that Israel, even when it has one of the most formidable militaries in the world, Israel will always remain, will never be Sparta, it always be Jerusalem. But I want to touch briefly a point that is related to that. We all grew up knowing, talking about the Israeli-Arab conflict. The Israeli-Arab conflict this and the Arab-Israeli conflict that. And I want to suggest the following. The Israeli-Arab conflict doesn't exist anymore. The Israeli-Arab conflict passed away. Yes, we have a conflict with the Palestinians, with our immediate neighbors that we didn't solve yet. But I say quite categorically, Israel doesn't have a conflict with the Arab states today. And if you don't believe me, let me take you by hand to a whirlwind tour of the Arab world. If you come, for instance, to Morocco or to Tunisia, you will, not in COVID days, okay? COVID days, of course, are different. You will hear a lot of Hebrew in the markets of Casablanca, Fez, Marrakesh, or Jerba. The borders are open, Israelis are welcome, and vice versa. If you visit Jordan or Egypt, obviously you will find Israeli embassies there in both capitals, in Cairo, in Amman. And if you visit the Gulf states, you will be amazed what is happening there. It started as a strategic cooperation, and most of it still undercover. But the relations between Israel and the Gulf states, most of them are flourishing. Netanyahu visited publicly Oman. I assume that there were other visits. And still there are barriers that prevent from making that public and establishing full diplomatic relations. But for sure, you can talk about the conflict with those countries. So what we are left with? We are left apparently with two Arab states with which we still have a conflict, namely Syria and Lebanon. To a certain degree, Iraq, but Iraq is less critical in that sense. So let's analyze. Do we have a conflict with Syria and Lebanon? We have strategic threats from Syria and Lebanon. But it's not with Syria and Lebanon themselves, but it is with the Iranian presence in Syria and Lebanon. In Syria, the attempt by the Iranian regime to entrench itself in Syria in order to open a second front with Israel. And in Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is for every practical purpose is an arm of Iran. So yes, we have problems from Syria and Lebanon, but we don't really have a conflict with Syria and Lebanon. Therefore, if I have, our first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, or David Ben-Gurion, is the same person, by the way. He used to say, he devised the Israeli security doctrine. And he used to say that since we have a conflict with the Arabs, we have to make partnership alliances with the non-Arab players in the Middle East, namely Iran and Turkey. Well, now the story is exactly reversed. We don't really have a conflict with the Arab world. We have problems with Turkey and a serious conflict with Iran. So if I have to summarize what are today the 4 serious strategic problems of Israel, I would say that the first one is Iran, the second one is Iran, the third one is Iran, and the fourth one is Iran. And those are different manifestations of the Iranian threat. It's not a joke. It's Iran as a power that tries to achieve nuclear capabilities, Iran has long-range missiles, Iran in Syria, Iran in Lebanon, Iran spreading terrorism, etc., etc. So Iran is still a serious challenge, but as I said, Israel is stronger than ever and can confront that challenge, those threats, and we do. Next reason for optimism is Israel's economy. I arrived to Israel from Argentina in 1971. Israel was really a poor country. I think the affluent Israeli was that Israeli that had an uncle in New Jersey that would send him second-hand clothes and I don't know, tuna cans. How the situation changed. I remember the 400% rate of inflation, annual rate of inflation. We Israelis didn't have shekels in our pockets because you could virtually feel the value slipping down your leg. Today, the shekel is probably the strongest currency in the world. I remember a deficit in the balance of payments. Today we have a surplus. I remember the coffers of the Bank of Israel depleted from foreign currency. Today we have foreign currency in the excess of $100 billion. And I remember days in which we could only dream about an Israeli company being bought by an American one by $15.5 billion. But obviously, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 has affected Israel's economy, as it did affect the entire world economy. But Israel entered the COVID crisis with such a robust economy that really we will prevail without any serious damage. Thank God, or thank I don't know who, probably also Israeli government, and also probably you investors in Israel. We entered the pandemic crisis with the lowest rate of unemployment ever, with unemployment of 3.something%, 3.5%, which is virtually zero. You know that you can never achieve 0% of unemployment. As I said, with the coffers of Bank of Israel full of foreign exchange. So with the ratings of the leading rating agencies in the world giving Israel remarkable, not only remarkable rating, but also remarkable horizons. So whoever remembers Israel of those days, of the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s and later, not to talk about the 50s, can only be perplexed. But what Israel achieved and is continuing to achieve, all the predictions are that we will very, very quickly return to the path in which we were marching. So that's a second reason for optimism. And then comes our foreign relations. You know, we talk a lot about BDS. Sometimes I think that we Jews and we Israel, including my government, are the best PR agency for the BDS movement. We talk so much about BDS that we promote them. BDS, let's be sincere, is a huge failure. The economic BDS, the commercial BDS, if, as I said, Israel's economy is flourishing, and Israel is a technological superpower and a biotechnological superpower and many other areas, that means that the BDS failed completely. The cultural BDS, look, if you come to Tel Aviv in a summer that is not a pandemic summer, you can choose whichever international star you like, Madonna, Lady Gaga, or if you are my age, I don't know, Paul Anka, and Bon Jovi, and you can listen to him in Tel Aviv or in Haifa or wherever. So that's also a great failure. But now, seriously, the relations that Israel developed, the bilateral relations that Israel developed with countries in the world never were something similar. There was a theory that said that they will never be that way before Israel achieves peace with the Palestinians. There were two theories. Israel cannot thrive economically until we achieve peace with the Palestinians. Israel cannot flourish in its diplomatic relations with the world until we achieve peace with the Palestinians. That's not that I don't want peace with the Palestinians. Of course, I would prefer peace with the Palestinians. But as a matter of fact, Israel thrives economically and has excellent relations with the world, and the Palestinian conflict was not solved yet. Today, no, we don't have to imagine. Today, in the midst of the pandemic, the Prime Minister of Greece, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, came to Israel with all his senior ministers for a G2G, government to government meeting. We agreed on opening our a sanitary corridor that will allow tourism from Israel to Greece and Cyprus and vice versa, starting August 1st, and many other agreements. But I want to mention specifically two countries. By the way, Israel today, it's hard to believe. Israel and Greece, which today are two staunch allies, didn't have diplomatic relations until 1990. 1990 is yesterday. 30 years ago, only 30 years ago, Greece recognized Israel. And now that we have an incredible alliance with both Hellenic countries. But let me touch two small countries, India and China. You know that India, China, and Israel together, we are 1/3 of the world population. So India and China, two countries that, again, Israel didn't have diplomatic relations at all with them. No recognition, no embassy, nothing. The relations between Israel and India today are intimate. And there is no other way to describe them: commercial, security, science, agriculture, culture, everything. The Prime Minister Netanyahu visited India, Prime Minister Modi visited Israel. The relations are really intimate. A country that, as I said, didn't have diplomatic relations at all with Israel barely 30 years ago. China, the situation is obviously different. With China, the relations is mainly commercial. The relation, again, with China it was unconscionable for an Israeli to visit China. Was a dream that we knew that it will never happen. In the pre-COVID days, there were a lot of daily flights from China to Israel and vice versa, and tourists and everything. By the way, the only limitation that we have to further develop the Israeli-Sino relationship is that this country, the United States, doesn't like it too much. So we have to limit the extent of our relationship with China, not to damage the relation with the United States. And you can go so on and on. That we spoke obviously about the Gulf countries, Latin America. No Israeli prime minister ever visited Latin America until a year or two ago, when Prime Minister Netanyahu since then visited twice. He visited Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil and Colombia and Mexico, and the relations are excellent. Even the change of government in Argentina that some experts feared about it, President Fernandez already visited Israel at the beginning of his term. And so except for some Western European countries, I challenge you to take a globe, spin it, put your finger randomly in a place, and if it's not an ocean or it's not a few, not all of them, a few Western European countries, your finger will be in a country with which Israel improved dramatically its diplomatic relations in the last, let's say, in the last decade or so. And finally, this country. With all due respect, with the relationship, the diplomatic relations of Israel with all other countries of the world, the strategic pillar of Israel's foreign policy, security policy strategy is the United States of America. Put all other countries on one side of one hand of the balance, put our relation with the United States on the other hand. I think that this one, the American one, is the heavier one. And without touching domestic politics, it's obvious that the relations are as close as they can be. By the way, I must say also that with the previous administration, the Obama administration, on the fundamentals of our relationship, the issue of security, of strategic cooperation, not only they were not weakened, they were strengthened during the Obama administration, but obviously during this administration even more so, and also in political aspects, just to name a few, Jerusalem, the moving of the embassy, the withdrawal from the Iranian deal, Golan Heights, the statement by Secretary Pompeo regarding the legality of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, and much, much more. So to sum up, to wrap it up, I think that, as I said, I return to Israel very optimistic about the future of my country. We managed to also to confront the COVID-19 pandemic with excellence, with flying colors. Obviously, every single person that passed away is a tragedy, but we had less than 300 deceased persons, while in New York State we had days of one day more than 800. I'm talking about 300 on the entire period of a few months. Basically, more Jews died, passed away from the COVID in the United States or in France or in Great Britain than in Israel, in spite of the fact that the communities, especially in France and Great Britain, are much, much smaller. I think that we can wrap it up with this. I will say a last observation. As you probably know, as a Consul General to Israel, I saw myself as the ambassador to the Jewish community of this country. New York, the area I cover has roughly 40% of the Jewish population of this country, and most of the national headquarters of the Jewish populations, the Jewish organizations. This is an area in which I am worried to some extent. I think that in both sides of the ocean, Israel and North America, we have to work harder in order to prevent distancing of our two communities. But I think that we know what should be done, and I hope it will be done. Thank you for the attention, and let's open it for Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I'm National Board Member Shira Lewis, and I speak for all of us. And when I mean all of us, I mean the couple of hundred here on Zoom and several more on Facebook Live. So I speak for all of us in expressing appreciation to Ambassador Dayan for joining us today. Throughout his time in the US, he has been a loyal friend of Israel Bonds, and we have been deeply gratified by his support. Ambassador Dayan, we will miss you, but we join as one in wishing you success and achievement in the next phase of your distinguished career. And on a personal note, I wanted to wish shalom and lehitro to my neighbor. Since you're in New York, I'm assuming you're home, so I'm just gonna wave behind you. I've been so impressed with your outreach to all the communities in the New York area, not just the Jewish one. You have definitely left your mark here, and we will miss you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Dayan has graciously agreed to take questions. Before he does, I want to say a word about investing in Israel bonds. I hope all of you have already invested, and I'm hoping you are considering an additional investment or a new investment in Israel bonds. We often say the worldwide Israel bonds enterprise is a safety net for Israel in times of crisis. This isn't a cliche, it is definitely the truth. And this was conveyed to us on a previous call with then Finance Ministry Director General Shai Babad. Shai told us, and I'm quoting him directly, quote, "We always say the bonds organization is a safety net in times of crisis. Now that the crisis is here, it shows us how important Israel bonds really is," unquote. Let's all do our part. Reach out to your Israel bonds registered representative to learn more about investing in Israel bonds. You can also invest online at www.israelbonds.com. I now turn the program over to Lehi Wagner, National Director of Business Development, for the Q&A portion of today's program. As a reminder, please submit any questions you might have to james.galfund@israelbonds.com. Thank you so much. Lehi?
Thank you, Shira. Our first question comes from Eric Levitsky of New Jersey.
Thank you, Lehi. Mr. Ambassador, good to see you as always. If annexation doesn't proceed on July 1st, what do you foresee as the future for the communities and residents in Judea and Samaria?
Thank you, Eric. Well, first of all, full disclosure, as you probably know, I am myself a resident of the community of Ma'ale Shomron in central Samaria, one of the so-called settlements. Actually, you know, if the so-called annexation, or as we refer to it, applying Israel law and jurisdiction and sovereignty over those areas is not done, nothing happened. Our current status will continue. And I would say something about that. People attribute to this issue of so-called annexation almost a cataclysmic significance, tectonic movements of plates. I suggest we calm down a little bit. We see it in a more rational perspective. Because, you know, it's simply translating Israel well-known positions that were delineated also by the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 in his last Knesset speech. It's almost one-on-one translating his words in that his latest political speech in the Knesset about having sovereignty over the Jordan River in the broadest sense of the word, he said, not returning to the 67 borders, not dividing Jerusalem, and having security responsibility over the area is a translation of that. But even more so, probably, I don't know if as a representative of Israel, I should calm you so much, those of you that are worried. But Israel negotiated the Golan Heights, and Israel negotiated Jerusalem even after the annexation. So it's not, you know, a supernatural event that changed things forever. I would say, and that relates to your question, it's a change of the temporary status quo. We have one status quo in Judea and Samaria from 1967 to 1994, the Oslo agreements, in which the entire area was under military control, under military administration. We have a second status quo from 1994, the Oslo agreements, till 2020, if that move will happen, which is the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, areas A, B, C. And we will have a third status quo in which some areas will be administered by civilians and not by military. And it will be a temporary one until an agreement with the Palestinians will be achieved. The moment the Palestinians will come to the negotiating table, we will negotiate. And we will present our positions, backed by facts in the ground, yes, and they will present their position, backed by their facts in the ground. And hopefully, if they cease to be so recalcitrant and so intransigent, one day we will reach an agreement, a final status agreement.
Thank you, Ambassador. Our next question comes from Harriet Blank, also from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It's always a pleasure to hear your perspectives. How have you assessed the level of support for Israel over the course of your 4 years here, both within the Jewish community and from non-Jewish groups?
Thank you for your question. Before I answer that, I would like to say a word about New Jersey. I mean, this event is auspiced by a New Jersey Federation, and the first two questioners were from New Jersey. First of all, the relation that we developed during these 4 years with New Jersey is amazing. And I want to be clear, I don't attribute it to myself. I attribute it to Governor Murphy, that came to Israel in his first overseas visit and has been for me also a huge personal friend. He wrote me a very moving letter of farewell in which he added a handwritten that it's clear to both of us and to Tammy, the First Lady of New Jersey, that we are friends for life. I always joke with him that you know, there are the similarities between New Jersey and Israel. We have the same size, roughly the same population, New Jersey a little bit more. I always tell Governor Murphy that Israel, we are similar in an additional way. Israel has two enemies, Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south. New Jersey has more dangerous enemies, New York City in the north and Philadelphia in the south. But we will help them if they need. Now, to your question, I think that the relations between Israel and the United States, as I said, have strengthened immensely during those years. But yes, we have issues that we have to take into consideration. I will refer. We are limited in the scope of time we have. I will refer to one of the issues, and this is in my belief that Israel must maintain bipartisan support in American politics, must maintain across the aisle support in American politics. It requires hard work from our side, and also from our friends here in America. It's tough, and I will tell you why it's tough. People say it's tough because Israel did this and Israel did that. I think it's tough for a very objective reason. Nothing anymore is bipartisan in America. Abortion is partisan, gun control is partisan, health insurance is partisan, tax cuts is partisan. Lately, even two issues that I could never believe that will become partisan, they did become partisan. One is the weather. One party believes in global warming, the other party does not. Sometimes I think that if the forecast, the weather forecast is too hot for you in CNN, move to Fox News because they don't believe in global warming. And the second issue that became surprisingly partisan is a certain cure for COVID-15. If you are a Republican, you believe that it cures COVID. If you are a Democrat, you don't believe that it cures COVID. Under those circumstances, it's extremely challenging to keep Israel as bipartisan. I think we still are bipartisan. I think that we should work hard in order to maintain that. And yes, this is one of the challenges that also my successor that was not named yet will have in New York, because in some senses, New York is one of the capitals, if not the capital, of America's, let's say, liberal positions.
Thank you, Ambassador. Our next question comes from Jonathan Slass from New Jersey.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for your assessment of the security threats to my state. As ambassador, it is your role to present the true face of Israel. In that capacity, what have you showcased from your perspective as Israel's greatest accomplishment?
You know, I am tempted to say Israel's technological prowess, the high-tech industry, the fact that we are ranked always as constantly as one of the most innovative economies in the world, and not sure that's a reason for pride. I think is the last miracle in a long series of miracles that we saw in Israel, from the establishment of Israel to the ingathering of the exiles to the reunification of Jerusalem and many more. The fact that we became such a technological superpower or powerhouse is really remarkable. But I think that I prefer to showcase another achievement that sometimes is not only overlooked, sometimes is doubted if it's true. And that's Israeli democracy. I think that Israeli democracy is nothing short than a miracle. We see it as, you know, something natural. Of course, Israel is democratic, was and is and will continue to be democratic. Israel was established in 1948 under the most precarious conditions you can imagine. Barely 500,000 Jews, attacked by 7 Arab countries. As I already mentioned, in the first years of existence, we embraced more than 1 million immigrants. Those 500,000 embraced more than 1 million. And the most important thing in this respect, Israel was established mainly by two groups of persons devoid completely from any democratic education. They didn't know what a democratic regime is, most of them. Jews from Eastern Europe, from Tsarist Russia and those environments, and Jews from the Middle East. Nevertheless, the moment we established the country, it was clear to everyone that it would be a democracy. And I think Israel democracy is remarkable. Yes, we did. We all know no democracy is perfect. I heard, for instance, someone told me, I don't know if that's true or not, that there is a democratic country in which one presidential candidate can get more popular votes, but her opponent is declared president. I don't know, maybe you also heard about that. So obviously it's not perfect, but I think it's remarkable. And the fact that in Israel, I compare Israel with other countries that were in the midst of conflicts, the way Israel related to its citizens that are the ethnicity of our adversaries, Arab Israelis. There are countries, you know how they treated them, Japanese or others. And I think we have we deserve, we are entitled to be proud of our democracy. Is kicking, is alive, sometimes kicks too much. Sometimes we have 3 elections a year. We become addicted to our democracy. But I think is a reason of to be proud of the state of Israel that sometimes, as I said, is not only overlooked, there are those that even cast doubts on its existence. I am very proud of it.
Thank you, Ambassador. And our next question comes from our Vice President of Business Development, Mr. Zev Rubinstein.
The one and only.
Thank God. So we are saying goodbye. And I must tell you that I spoke to somebody very high in position in Israel that you and me know. And I told him if Dani Dayan survived Zev Rubinstein so many years in New York, he can be an excellent negotiator or whatever. You can put him wherever you want. I know that your wife, Einat, that lives all the time in Israel, is watching. So she's a real Eshet Chai. And I am happy and proud that we became friends. And I thank you. Sorry if I too much pressed on you. I'm releasing you from the employment of Israel Bonds. You did very well. Now going to my question. And I will add to my question something that came because of the call that I had a few minutes. So the official question that I have for you, what has been the reaction to annexation from the American Jewish community and other friends of Israel? And how do you feel about it? So how do you feel about it? We know. But what was the reaction from the United States? And a little bit annexing to this question, do you think that because President Trump is busy these days, God forbid with COVID-19 and other situations, that he will draw back from helping Israel or pushing his plan because he needs some quiet and relaxation in the United States and he doesn't need a front in the Middle East?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Zevik, for your friendship. It has been really, sometimes a tough love, but always love. And I really will miss you, but I will visit and it will be okay. Now, to your questions, Zevik, as I said, or I hinted, I think that reaction to the entire issue, of the so-called settlements, the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, I sometimes feel that the significance that is attributed to them, the importance is almost supernatural. It's detached from reality in many, many cases. And the same thing happens regarding the annexation, the so-called annexation, or in applying a Jewish sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty of Judea and Samaria. First of all, we don't know what will happen. I have to be sincere. I don't know if the Prime Minister knows what will happen. I don't know if our alternate Prime Minister, Benny Gantz, knows what will happen, or President Trump knows what will happen. The issue is still under deliberations. As you know, in Israel, there is broad support, but it's also broad opposition on both sides of the political spectrum. Some of my former colleagues in the Yesha Council oppose the annexation for their reasons, and in the left, Some of them oppose it, so it's too early to say. What I hope is that our American friends will see the real weight of this thing, the real consequences of anything, and don't attribute it to them, as I said, some tectonic supernatural attributes that it doesn't have. The positions of the State of Israel for the last 15 years are very clear. Israel will not return to the 67 borders. Israel will not divide Jerusalem. Israel will not uproot Israelis or Arabs from their homes, and Israel will keep security, overall security responsibility over the entire area. Those are well-known positions of the government of Israel, at least since 2009, and they will be reflected on the ground. They will change some absurdities that exist. For instance, I will give you one absurdity that applying the Israeli sovereignty will prevent. You mentioned my dear wife Einat. As you know, Einat is a senior executive in the Ariel University. For God's sake, why was it needed that the approval of the Ariel University should be signed by an army general and not by the Minister of Education of Israel? What sense does it make? If the sovereignty is applied, the Minister of Education that approves a university in Haifa will be the same one that will approve a university in Ariel, or not only university, other things. Those are the changes. It doesn't change the daily life of one Palestinian. And therefore, I think that the reactions that I see even in Congress starting to take place, I think are completely misled.
Thank you, Ambassador. And the last and final question will actually come from me. But first of all, I just want to thank you for everything that you did.
Thank you. It was great to work with you. When Zevik didn't interfere, it was great to work with you.
Which I was about to say, it was a true pleasure to work with you and with your staff. And now to my question. So as you return to Israel, what do you envision as the next direction your career will take?
Wow, that's the most challenging question I got today. I must be sincere, I don't know. I return to 14 days of quarantine and then we will see. The other thing that I must admit is that the good things in my life, in my professional life, happened surprisingly. I didn't intend back in the 80s when I was very young to start my own company, but for some reasons I got carried and did it, and it was very successful. I didn't intend to be chairman of Yesha, and I was asked by many people to take that responsibility and did, and I was surprised by the phone call of Prime Minister Netanyahu asking me to join the Foreign Service. So probably the next surprise will be the answer to your question. That being said, I would say the following. I started my, let's say, my public life with mostly with one issue, the issue of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, and I for sure return with similar positions on that issue, but with a much broader set of interests. The issue of the continuity of the Jewish people, and even more so the bond between Israel and the Jewish world, the world Jewry, is deep in my bones now. I am worried about it. I think that not enough Israelis are interested in that, and that's a tragedy, and that should be changed. Very probably, in some sense, I would like to be interested in doing something related to that. Exactly what, I don't know. Look, I will tell you the truth. I would like to do big things. I think that we are in a situation, especially after the COVID and the situation of Jewish institutions here in this country, that needs extreme changes. I would like one to be, I don't know, chairman of the Jewish Agency, of Minister of Diaspora Affairs. The problem that in the Israeli system, in order to do one of those, to fulfill one of those positions, you have to jump entirely into the partisan politics pool or swamp, as they call it, and I'm not very inclined to do it. So I have an 11-hour flight to Ben Gurion and then 14 days of quarantine. I will think it over.
Well, we all wish you good luck in whatever it will end up being. I now invite Howard Goldstein, Chairman of the National and International Board, to conclude the program.
Thank you, Ambassador, and everybody on the call for joining us today. Nice to see you again also, Ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Ambassador has taught us during his tenure in the United States that Israel is just not a state, but more importantly, a state of mind. You've taught that very well to us. You have been a true friend of Israel Bonds. We are gratified not only by your presence today, things you've done in the past, but all the future great things we anticipate from you. But also by your support and advocacy over the course of these last 4 years has been amazing. Now, let's have a look. Ambassador Dayan, we applaud your accomplishments, your stand-up manner, and look forward to continued achievements from you. And we expect it. Ladies and gentlemen, these interactions are branded as our global events because we are truly one big global mishpucha. We are the Israel Bonds family. As chairman of the National and International Board, I am blessed. I'm also gratified that you all are part of our family, and I thank you for your continued support of the Israel Bonds organization. Our next global event will be Thursday, July 9th at 1 o'clock, New York time. The guest will be one of Israel's most prominent business executives, Ofer Strauss, chairperson of the Strauss Group. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. Am Israel Chai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.